Good morning, students. Today we are going to take the third story prescribed in your syllabus, The Axe by R.K. Narayan. Before we begin with the story, let me tell you about the author. R.K. Narayan, along with Mulkraj Anand and Raja Rao, are called the Trinity in English literature. I repeat again, R.K. Narayan, Mulkraj Anand and Raja Rao. These three writers of Indian origin are considered to be the Trinity, the three. All the three writers had been the pioneers of writing English in India. We will be specifically adhering to R.K. Narayan since we have his story prescribed in the syllabus, that is The Axe. The story is titled The Axe, written by R.K. Narayan. R.K. Narayan was born in 1905 and his first collection of stories, Swami and Friends, was released in 1935. This is a short story which is prescribed in the syllabus. Now, before we talk about the different details of the story, let me give you the story in brief. The Axe is a story which centers around the main protagonist, the main character, who's called Velen. Again I repeat, the story, The Axe, centers around the main protagonist who is called Velen. When the story begins, we are introduced to the fact that once an astrologer was passing through that particular village, and when he sees Velen, and then he tells him that you are one day going to become the master of a great house with a lot of acres of land along with it. Now this is a complete surprise to Velen and all those people sitting out there, because Velen happens to be from a family which can hardly, bring their ends together. They don't have food to eat properly and their condition is, below the poverty line, you can say. So, when the astrologer predicts that Velen is going to be the owner of a big house with a lot of lands around it, this is a complete surprise and even Velen is not ready to believe this. But as the story progresses, one fine day, when Velen takes the food for his father working in the farm, his father slaps him and Velen gets agitated by that particular fact. And at that point, that happens to be the turning point of the story, Velen just puts the tiffin down, he stares at his father and leaves his home. Once Velen leaves the home, he comes to the city and then he keeps on, moving for days together without eating anything. And then he meets an old man who takes him to a place, and that particular man has thought of a garden in his mind. The garden exists only in the mind of that old man, and Velen and when they reach to that particular spot, Velen sees that there is vast area of land which is having a lot of weeds and unwanted plants growing over it. So the very first thing that Velen has been assigned, which can be considered as his job, or you can say that Velen has been given the job of a gardener, is to clean that particular huge area of land which is completely filled with the weeds and the unwanted plants. So Velen sets out to clean the land, and he is, we cannot say 100%, but basically he is 99% successful in cleaning the land. And when the whole land is cleaned, it appears to be a huge land. Slowly and slowly the construction work begins on that particular land along with the garden. And when the house gets constructed, it becomes such a huge house that it appears to be a big mansion. So probably what had been predicted by the astrologer is truly not significant with Velen right now, but yes, the house is as according to the prediction of the astrologer, that it's a huge mansion, it's a huge house. So the house gets constructed, the owner moves in, and Velen has few characteristics. He is a man with a righteous intent. He is intelligent. He is loyal. He is sensible. And throughout the story, there is one particular thing that we can say happens to be the weakness of Velen, and that is his love for plants. The love for plants is an integral part of Valen's character. Valen cannot be separated from the plants and probably justifies his job as a gardener. So when the house gets constructed, a particular area has been assigned for the garden. And in this particular garden, Valen plants the sapling of a marigosa tree. And from there the story begins. I will just read out a few lines and then take the story back again, because these lines are the lines which are at the climax of the story, but they sum up the story in the whole. This is particularly the end of the story, and the lines they read is: the dull noise of a blade meeting a tough surface reached his ears. He got up and rushed out. He saw 4 men hackling the massive trunk of the old marigosa tree. He let out a scream. Stop that! He took his staff, the stick, and rushed at those who were hackling. They easily avoided the blow he aimed. What is the matter? They asked. So for your reference, I just tell you that this particular section appears at the flag end of the story. And here in these particular lines, a few people are cutting down a tree which happens to be a marigosa tree. And when the sound of that axe is on the tree, that shatters Valen. And he suddenly moves out of his hut and he talks to that people and he said, stop doing that. Okay, and those people, they tell him, why stop that? Valen starts weeping. Valen wept. And what does he say? See the sadness, the pathos that comes out in the voice of Valen when he says, this is my child. I planted it. I saw it grow. I loved it. Don't cut it down. So one single line in the story is enough to reflect about the character, as to what the character is about, who's so sensible, who's so touching, that even the mere cutting of a tree moves him into tears, and the lines that he utters are indeed very shattering when he says that don't cut the tree is like a child to me. Remember students, this is the same marigosa tree that I pointed out a few minutes back was the first sapling that Valen planted in that wide acres of land that were there, which he had cleaned and turned into a garden. And what do the people reply? But it is the company's orders, what can we do? We shall be dismissed if we don't obey, and someone else will do it. So this is what those people reply, that says that, okay, we consider your sentiments, we know that it hurts when we are cutting down the tree, but if we are not going to do it, who's going to do? Somebody else is going to do the job, but ultimately the tree has to be cut. Valen says further, Valen stood thinking for a while and said, well, you at least do me this good turn, give me a little time. I will bundle up my clothes and go away. After I am gone, do what you like. They laid down their axes and waited. So there is one condition that Valen puts before those people, and he says that you just do me a favor, that stop for a few minutes. Let me wind up my things, let me go away from this place, and once I'm gone from this place, you can happily do whatever you want to do. So those people are, considerate enough, they give him that particular time. He packs up his things and then he starts moving out of the house. The tree cutters squatted on the ground and watched the old man go. Nearly half an hour later, his voice came from a distance, half indistinctly. Don't cut yet. I am still within hearing. Please wait till I am gone farther. So this is how the story ends. Now coming back to where I told you that when Valen takes the job of a gardener, he starts living in that place. The owner of the house comes. The owner has children. The children grow old. Time passes. Valen becomes a permanent member of that particular house. And as time progresses, the owner, who was once upon a time a young person, changes into an old man. And the conditions which had been there at the time of the owner were not the same during the time of his children. His children were not bothered about what the garden was and what this old man Valen was. So one fine day, when the master of the house dies, Valen is struck with one single thought, and he says, Now, what is going to happen to the house and what is going to happen to me? Because throughout these years, Valen had formed a strong bond with the family, with the house, and with the garden. So, initially, after the death of the owner, the kids, they keep on coming and then they keep on fighting with each other, and after a period of time, all of them are separated, they leave the house. Once all the kids leave the house turns towards a torn and shattered condition, slowly and slowly getting little deteriorated with the passage of time. Now the tenants are put into the house. One tenant comes which tells Velen that you're an old man and your position is not to interfere much into the house affairs. You better go and relax into your hut. So that hurts Velen a lot because he had treated this tree, the garden and everything as his own. So that particular tenant also doesn't stay long, and slowly with the passage of time, tenants come and go, nobody stays for long. And then finally, this particular house that had been built with such love and affection is termed as a ghost house. Because nobody stays there, nobody is willing to live there, and the only possessor of that particular house happens to be Valen. He keeps on living there, he loses his wife, he loses his children, he is able to maintain a little portion of the land in his native village, thus passing his time. He moves from the garden to the outer veranda of the house, he lives there. And one fine day when he's just sitting, there is a car that comes in front of the door, and a man steps out of the car and he says that, okay, open the door. Valen opens the small door for the man, he says, no, open the big door. So the huge gate is opened, and that when the gate is opened, it has a creaking sound because it has not been opened since ages. So that man, he comes in and he tells Valen that this house has been purchased by me, and now no longer you belong to this particular house. You have to leave this house. So that's a big jolt to Valen, but somehow he knows he has to go, so he starts winding up his things and everything. And the lines that I have read you a few minutes ago are the climax of the story. When everything has been purchased by the person, the house has to be converted into some other thing by a company. Valen is left with no option but to move on. But the sad and the pathetic part of the story is the sapling of the Margosa tree, which Valen had once planted many years back, has matured into a full tree. And it's not only a tree to Valen, it's like a child to him. As a parent, we all see our children grow. We see them, we nurture them, we provide them with the best of the things, and when they grow, we develop a strong affection to them. So Valen doesn't have that strong affection with his children, but he has that strong affection with the tree. So the title of the story, the axe, is symbolic in the sense that this axe is not a mere axe by which you're cutting down the tree, which is only a tree. But that tree is not only a tree, it is something which holds a lot of significance, a lot of emotion, and a lot of deeper feelings for Valen. So the love for the plants, which had been the weakness of Valen, he's not in a position to do anything. He cannot stop them from cutting the tree, but only the sad thing that he says that, okay, let me go, let me move far away so that I am not able to see the tree being cut. So R.K. Narayan sums up the story in a very, very moving, in a very emotional manner. And this has been the characteristics of R.K. Narayan's writing. That he doesn't talk much about elite, he doesn't talk about the hi-fi society, he doesn't talk about the wealthy, the aristocratic people, but he simply talks about those small people with their small desires, with their small emotions and their small life. Who is Valen? What is his purpose in life? What does he aim to? Is basically what R.K. Narayan wishes to tell through the story. A little more on the story and another story in tomorrow's class. Thank you so much.